page 6 and 7 of this document and highlight something. It's just a normal brochure that none of us really read. You can see there at the top it says code and then device, disclosure date, the EFT code as you're going down the left, electronic equipment, and go down then to the other side, hour, and then password, PIN. And then there's something called a prescribed person. Now, a prescribed person to me is a person, that's the identified individual. It's like prescribed medicine. If you go to the chemist, you get a prescription and you go and fetch your prescribed medicine. Or as an example, I have a prescribed diet because I have a certain blood group or whatever. You have certain prescriptions like prescribed. So when I read this, it made absolutely no sense to me until I read, and the wording was weird for me. Let me zoom in a bit and let's have a look what that paragraph says. Prescribed person, a person who appears to us either A, to be a prescribed person or entity under the Charter of the United Nations, B, to be in breach of the laws of any jurisdiction relating to money laundering or counterterrorism, C, to appear in a list of persons with whom dealings are prescribed by the government or a regulatory authority of any jurisdiction, or D, act on behalf or for the benefit of a person listed in subclauses A to C. Now, so what? Well, I realized that, in fact, I didn't even realize it. Somebody showed me that the spelling is different. It's not prescribed, it's proscribed. So I said, proscribed, what's that? Let me go onto the internet and have a look at dictionary.com. Here you can have a look at it and have a look what proscribe means. I'll read from the top with you that you get this with me. Proscribe is a verb, and number one, to denounce or condemn a thing as dangerous or harmful. Number two, to put outside the protection of the law or to outlaw. Number three, to banish or exile. Number four, to announce the name of a person as condemned to death and subject to confiscation of property. You see that? Proscribed isn't the prescribed person. It isn't the person whose name's on there. Proscribed, and let's go back to the previous picture now and you'll see what it means. Proscribed person is a person, have a look at the fourth one there, who is condemned to death or has subject to confiscation of property. Let's go back again. A prescribed person is a person who appears to us either to be a prescribed person or entity under the Charter of the United Nations. Can you see what they're doing here? They are starting to associate the banks to the United Nations. I said this was going to happen last year in November, and boom, there it is. The documentation coming out saying now the United Nations is going to become that central controlling hub of who is a terrorist and who isn't a terrorist. And if you are, we have the right to confiscate your money and to take everything away from you and lock you up and even put you under a death sentence. There's a big difference between prescribed and proscribed. How brilliant is that? One letter, and it makes all the difference. Now, if you understand what's going on at the United Nations, then this will make even more sense. Have a look at this video clip that I'm going to show you in a minute, and have a look what the impact of this will be. The United Nations is trying to shut down the free speech of individuals, specifically pertaining to religion. Islam is always the scapegoat, so just put Islam to the side and think about your position when the Lord calls you to accept His blue and you stand in contradiction to the blue of the Antichrist. Or if you happen to do an evangelistic crusade or teach people about the Antichrist, who he is and how he's trying to bring in these colors and what the problem is, have a look what the United Nations is trying to do to us. Please note that they pushed this bill through last November already as it's unsigned, but it's gone through. I forget the words, it'll come to me now. But then, now in March this year, they actually wanted to make it official. Watch this video clip with me.
There is a major effort taking place to curb free speech in this country, irrespective of our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. And free speech advocates say the United Nations has come down on precisely the wrong side. The United Nations has adopted what it calls a resolution combating defamation of religions. The United Nations now wants to make that anti-blasphemy resolution binding on member nations, including, of course, our own. That would make it a crime in the United States if the United Nations were to have its way to criticize religion, in particular, Islam. Kelly Pilgrim has our report.
The UN General Assembly is considering a binding resolution urging member states to make it a crime to criticize Islam.
What they would do would be to make it illegal to put out a movie or write a book or a poem which somebody could say was defamatory of Islam.
The so-called anti-blasphemy resolution would call on governments to pass their own laws to determine what can be said about religion in public. The resolution urges states to provide within their respective legal and constitutional systems adequate protection against acts of hatred, discrimination, intimidation, and coercion resulting from defamation of religion. But the U.S. says the concept of defamation of religion has another meaning. While appearing in name to promote tolerance, the implementation of this concept actually fosters intolerance and has served to justify restrictions on human rights and fundamental freedoms. Even talking about the influence of Islam on terrorism could be called criminal under this resolution if adopted by an individual country.
You are entitled to say that in America, but not if the UN has its way. They would criminalize that kind of practice, and they're trying to do it elsewhere around the world.
A group of 57 Organization of Islamic Countries, the largest bloc at the United Nations, has been pushing it out of concern, it says, over anti-Islamic behavior, saying this resolution is a major step towards sensitizing the international community on the serious impact of defamation of religions. Last December, the General Assembly passed it as a non-binding resolution. And this year, a binding resolution is expected to be introduced as early as March. Human rights activists say its influence is already being felt.
There have been a number of prominent cases, most recently in India, for instance. The editor of a newspaper was charged for reprinting an article that had initially been printed in the UK.
While the article mentioned the three major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, the editor was arrested for, quote, hurting the religious feelings of Muslims.
Did you hear that? They want to pass it, or it already has been passed as an unbinding resolution in December. Now they want to pass it as a binding resolution, right? And all member states of the United Nations are going to enforce that you will no longer be able to speak against any other religion. We don't want to speak against any other religion. We just want to speak Bible truth. And the whole world is going to have to make a decision whether you're going to accept the blue of Christ or the blue of the Antichrist. Can you see the urgency in why these DVDs have to go out all over the world? Spread them like the leaves of autumn. Get the message out. Because if they're locking up editors of a newspaper just because he's reprinting something that was already, he doesn't even come up with it himself. He's just reprinting something. That means books like The Great Controversy, that means DVDs like this will be banned possibly even this year still. The urgency is like it's never been before, right? There's something going on. Well, in America alone, there are over 600 concentration camps. I've given you photo footage of this already previously, but I've never given you video footage of the concentration camp until now. Now I have video footage of an Australian concentration camp which is up and running and fully manned, fully operational, and yet standing empty. Look at this.
Refugee advocates have savaged Australia's giant new offshore detention centre, calling it over the top and a waste of taxpayers' money. Despite claiming a more humane asylum seeker policy, the Rudd government says it still plans to use the $400 million Christmas Island facility.
Is this state-of-the-art for dealing with asylum seekers or an inhumane, scandalous waste of $400 million?
The centre is totally over the top. The security is extraordinarily harsh.
Last week, the Rudd government took Amnesty's Graham Thom and other leading refugee advocates on the 5-hour flight from Perth to Christmas Island to inspect our new immigration detention facility. They've now written to the minister calling the centre extremely